They kicked me out at 15 and used my inheritance to pay for my sister's wedding. Yeah, that kind of family. I slept in a tent behind the rose bushes while they celebrated her baby's shower like it was the royal coronation. Hi, I'm Lauren. I was the other twin, the invisible one, the quiet one. 15 years later, I bought a house with my own hands. I opened the door, and guess who showed up asking to move in? This isn't a story about revenge. It's about what happens when the forgotten daughter comes back, with receipts. Before we dive into the story, let me learn a bit about you. If you're a charming lady, please leave the number 1 in the comments. And if you're a dashing gentleman, leave the number 2. This way, I can send you a special greeting. Now, let's start the story together. Some babies are greeted with balloons and lullabies. I came into this world with a sigh and a storage room in the basement. My name is Lauren Chen. I was born 5 minutes after my twin sister, Emily, on a chilly October morning in Topeka, Kansas. The leaves were starting to turn then, burnt orange, gold, brittle, like the pages of a storybook no one bothered to finish. Mom used to say, Emily cried first. She was always the fighter. Then she'd glance at me, half smiling, as if I were the echo of a noise long forgotten. We lived in a modest split-level house. From the outside, it looked like any other home on our cul-de-sac. Neat hedges, a mailbox painted light blue, wind chimes on the porch. But the inside was divided not just by stairs, but by warmth. Emily had a room upstairs filled with sunlight and soft lavender curtains. I had a space in the basement with cold cement floors and a dangling light bulb that flickered whenever the washing machine kicked in. I don't remember when I realized the difference. It wasn't marked by one moment, but by hundreds. At every birthday party, the attention always gathered around Emily. She'd twirl in new dresses, blow out candles while cameras flashed. Meanwhile, I stood near the fence, holding a paper plate with a sliver of cake, listening to laughter that never quite reached me. One year, a neighbor leaned in and asked Mom, "Didn't you have another daughter?" And Mom smiled, her voice light. "Oh, that's Lauren. She's quiet, doesn't like attention." Quiet. Invisible, really. At school, I tried to prove I mattered. Straight A's, perfect attendance, the math team, spelling bees. I once brought home a district award. I stood by the kitchen doorway, holding it out like it might finally unlock something in Dad. He glanced up from his paper, nodded, and said, "That's good. You could learn to be more like Emily. She connects with people." Then he went back to reading. I didn't say a word. I just folded the certificate and slid it into my drawer. Emily was light and sparkle. Cheer captain, theater lead, the one who left glitter trails wherever she walked. People remembered her laugh, her perfume, her way of hugging everyone like she meant it. I was the shadow at her heels. If she shined, I dulled. One evening in 8th grade, I asked Mom if I could get new sneakers. The ones I wore were cracked at the soles, the laces frayed into strings. She looked at me and said plainly, "You don't go anywhere that matters." That was that. A week later, Emily got white and gold running shoes for gym class. There's something exhausting about asking to be seen. After a while, you just stop. You adjust. I made friends with silence. I learned how to avoid the squeaky step on the way to the basement. I read books beneath a single bulb and traced cracks in the cement when sleep wouldn't come. My world shrank to those walls, that narrow bed, the hum of the dryer spinning above me like a distant lullaby. My 15th birthday came without much fanfare. No cake, no streamers, no candlelight. At dinner, Emily giggled as she opened a box with a shiny new phone. Dad patted her back. Mom asked her to pose for a picture. I sat quietly, picking at my baked chicken, waiting for someone to remember. No one did, not even a card. Later that night, I climbed down to the basement. The air was damp. My comforter felt colder than usual. I curled beneath it, trying to shake off the ache in my throat. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I just felt small. I reached under the mattress for my notebook, a soft blue spiral-bound one I'd been writing in since I turned 12. It was where I kept thoughts I couldn't say out loud. That night, I wrote, "If I disappeared, would anyone notice?" Something inside me shifted as I finished that sentence. A stillness, maybe, or maybe the first whisper of resistance. I got up, walked to the corner of the room where I kept a worn-out shoebox, and slipped in a $1 bill I'd saved from lunch money. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My own tiny form of protest. A declaration that I existed, even if no one else seemed to see it. Then, just before midnight, I went upstairs for a glass of water. The kitchen was dark. A stack of mail sat by the sink. I flipped through it absently. Bills, coupons, holiday catalogs. And then I saw it. The family's annual Christmas card. The photo showed Mom, Dad, and Emily sitting on the porch swing, all dressed in matching red sweaters. The caption read, "Wishing you joy from our family to yours." My heart stilled. I wasn't in the picture, not even at the edge. I'd been cropped out completely. I carried the card back to the basement and stared at it under the bare bulb. The smiles on their faces looked warm, even loving. But to me, they were colder than the floor beneath my feet. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rip the photo. I simply turned it face down and slid it under my mattress. I added another $1 to the shoebox, and for the first time, I whispered to myself, "This isn't forever." Emily had once joked over dinner, swirling pasta on her fork, "If I ever had a baby, Mom would throw me a parade." I remember that night clearly. We were 15, sitting at opposite ends of the table like strangers. I didn't laugh, not because it wasn't funny, but because deep down, I knew it was probably true. A year later, she wasn't wrong. It was a Sunday morning in August, the kind where the air outside stuck to your skin and even the trees looked tired. I was folding my thin blanket in the basement when I heard footsteps pounding above me. Quick, excited, not the kind that came for chores or bad news. Then Mom's voice floated down, oddly cheerful. "Lauren, come up here." I blinked. It wasn't a tone I was used to. When I climbed the stairs, I saw Emily dancing around the dining room table, holding something in her hand. A pregnancy test. "A baby," she beamed. "I'm going to have a baby." Mom was crying, smiling through her tears, and Dad stood next to her looking dazed but proud. I stood frozen by the doorframe, unsure whether to congratulate or vanish. The following days were a blur of vanilla-scented candles, trips to the doctor, and pale yellow paint swatches for the nursery. Neighbors started dropping by with gentle smiles and hushed voices. One even brought Emily a basket with organic teas and cocoa butter lotion. No one asked how a pair of 15-year-olds would manage, or whether the father was in the picture. That wasn't the kind of family we were. We didn't ask, we arranged, we moved forward. 3 weeks later, Mom called me upstairs again. This time, her voice was clipped, businesslike. "We've been thinking," she said, gesturing toward the kitchen island. "With the baby coming, we need to make some space. Emily will move downstairs. It's quieter there." I looked at her, confused. "But I'm in the basement." She nodded. "Exactly." I waited for the rest of the sentence, for something that made sense. It didn't come. "You'll have to move out," she said simply. "Out?" I echoed. Dad entered then, drying his hands with a dish towel. "It's not permanent," he added. "You know that camping tent we used last summer? It's still in the shed, just for a few weeks until things settle." No one shouted. No one called me names. That would have been easier. Instead, I nodded slowly, the air thinning around me, and turned to get my shoes. That afternoon, I set up the old green tent behind the rose bushes in our backyard. The petals above me were in full bloom, bright and soft like little flares of joy. Beneath them, I spread a sleeping bag on dry grass, trying not to cry as I pinned the corners down with bricks. Inside the house, Emily's new room came alive with the sounds of celebration. Paint cans opening, furniture shifting, her laughter spilling from the window like perfume. She was radiant, even through the glass. I listened to them decide where the crib would go, whether the baby should have star-shaped lights or clouds, if they should buy an air purifier. That night, I lay in the tent staring at the canvas ceiling. Sweat clung to my skin. Mosquitoes buzzed in the distance. I held my flashlight in one hand and a half-read math textbook in the other, trying to finish the homework I knew no one would care about. I told myself it was temporary. A few weeks, just a bump in the road. The bump became a hill when, on the third night, the weather changed. I woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of heavy raindrops drumming against the tent walls. First it was a trickle, then a steady pour. The seams gave in. Water seeped in at the corners, pooling near my shoes. My blanket clung to my legs, damp and useless. I clutched the flashlight tighter, its beam wobbling across the sagging ceiling. By morning, my math textbook was warped and soft at the edges. I wrapped it in a grocery bag and shoved it into my backpack. My clothes smelled like mildew. The rose petals had begun to fall around the tent, weighed down by the storm. By morning, my math textbook was warped and soft at the edges. I wrapped it in a grocery bag and shoved it into my backpack. My clothes smelled like mildew. The rose petals had begun to fall around the tent, weighed down by the storm. That day at school, I kept my head low. I didn't want pity. I just wanted to disappear. But the worst part wasn't the rain. It was knowing that no one in that house had come outside to check on me, not a knock, not a glance through the back window. Nothing. When school let out, I didn't go straight home. I wandered. My feet carried me along Maple Avenue, past houses with trimmed lawns and children's bikes left on driveways. I paused in front of Sunrise Oven, a small corner bakery I'd passed 100 times but never entered. The glass window fogged slightly from the heat inside. A man stood behind the counter arranging croissants on a silver tray. My stomach growled. I hadn't eaten since lunch, and even that had been a packet of saltines and an apple. I pressed my hand against the cool glass, staring at the golden crusts, the sugar-dusted tops, the rows of bread loaves that looked like comfort shaped into something solid. I didn't step in, not yet, but something about the smell of fresh bread and warmth behind that glass stuck with me. It was the first time in days I felt drawn towards something instead of away from everything. I walked home slowly, passing the roses now heavy with rain. My tent sagged in the middle. A few petals had blown inside and stuck to my damp pillow. I didn't brush them off. I lay down, pulled the blanket over my knees, and closed my eyes. The roses bloomed above. I slept in the dirt. The bakery didn't look like much from the outside, just a faded green awning and a flickering open sign that buzzed louder than it should. But the smell was something else. It hit me before I even opened the door. Warm yeast, rising dough, roasted coffee beans, and something deeper I couldn't name right away. It smelled like survival. I'd passed by Sunrise Oven for weeks, always slowing near the window, pretending to look for a street sign or tie my shoelace. On this particular afternoon, my stomach had been growling since second period, and the rain from the night before had soaked through my only pair of decent sneakers. I was cold, damp, and trying to act like I wasn't. When I finally stepped through the door, a small bell above it gave a tired ring. The man behind the counter looked up from dusting powdered sugar on a tray of croissants. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with thick arms and a face that had forgotten how to smile, but not how to notice. "I'm looking for a job," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. He stared at me for a long second, long enough that I started to regret walking in. Then he set down the sugar shaker. "Can you wash pans?" I nodded quickly. "Dinner's included," he added. That was it. No questions about my age or experience, no forms, no friendly welcome speech, just a nod toward the back kitchen. I worked in silence that day, scrubbing metal trays caked with flour and darkened from years of use. I didn't ask where anything went. I just watched, memorized, and followed. The sink was deep and the soap stung my hands, but I didn't care. I kept my head down until my hair clung to my neck and my wrists ached from the scouring. That night, after everything was clean and quiet, the man, Walter, as I would later learn, handed me a paper bag without saying a word. Inside were 2 buttered rolls and a small cup of potato soup, still warm. I sat on the back step and ate slowly, watching steam rise from the cup like smoke from something sacred. I returned the next day, and the next. Walter never asked where I lived or why my socks were always damp. He never looked at the holes in my backpack or the way I flinched when someone opened the oven door too fast. He just handed me a clean apron each evening and pointed toward the sink. 2 weeks into the job, he handed me a silver key without ceremony. "There's a room upstairs," he said, drying his hands on a towel. "Used to be storage. Has a mattress. It's warm." I didn't say anything at first, just looked at the key in my palm, then up at his face. He wasn't offering charity. He was offering dignity. I moved in that same night. The room was dusty and small, with walls that smelled faintly of cinnamon and old cardboard. But the mattress didn't touch dirt. The floor didn't shake when someone laughed. No one could lock me out of this space. It was mine. I tucked my shoebox of crumpled bills beneath the mattress. Then, with the last $3 I had, I walked to the dollar store and bought a spiral-bound notebook. That night, I wrote the word budget in shaky letters at the top of the first page. Underneath, I made 3 envelopes out of old receipts. Food school escape. Each dollar I earned had a place now. Each one was a vote for the future I wanted. My grandfather used to say, "Never beg, bake." I didn't know then how much of that phrase I would carry, but here I was, scraping dried dough off pans and somehow beginning to believe in a future beyond the tent. At school, I kept to myself. I stopped buying lunch and instead slipped into the library to warm cans of soup in the microwave, using napkins as plates. I started tutoring a younger girl in geometry for a few extra dollars each week. I clipped coupons from the free weekly circular and asked the cashier to ring up items separately so I could use them all. Some nights I stayed up reading by the dim lamp Walter had found in the back room. Other nights I simply lay there, listening to the hum of the ovens below and the soft rattle of wind against the window pane. And for the first time, I wasn't waiting for footsteps above me or for someone to call me upstairs just to push me further down. One evening, after closing up, I was wiping down the counters when Walter said quietly, "You're not a stray, you know." I froze for a second, then looked up. "You come in tired, quiet, like you're always ready to be sent away, but you're not a stray." He went back to folding aprons after that, like he hadn't just said the most important thing anyone had ever told me. Outside, the wind had picked up. Leaves scraped across the sidewalk like dry paper. But inside the bakery, the oven was still warm, and the air smelled like rising dough. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't cry when I bought the house. That surprised me. I had pictured it 100 times. Me standing on a porch, holding a key with shaking hands and tears streaking my face. But when it finally happened, I didn't cry. I just stood there. For 10 long minutes, I stood in front of that plain red door, key clutched between my fingers, the dandelions swaying behind me. I wasn't scared of the house. I was scared of what it meant to step into something that no one could take from me. The realtor had already driven off. The sidewalk was quiet, just the sound of wind chimes and the rustle of a grocery bag filled with my first items, a roll of paper towels, a bottle of dish soap, and a half loaf of sourdough Walter had sent me off with. I slid the key into the lock. The door stuck a little, so I had to push harder than expected. It opened with a low creak, releasing the scent of dust, dry wood, and old sun. The house was small, just over 900 square feet, with a living room that bled into a narrow kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom where the faucet still dripped. But it was mine. The walls were still covered in fading wallpaper with tiny blue flowers, and the floor groaned beneath my steps. I didn't care. I sat cross-legged in the middle of the empty living room, the paper bag beside me, and let the silence settle. A line came to me then, something I hadn't thought about in years. At 15, in the dim light of a library corner, I had written, "By 30, I will have a home that's mine." I had forgotten that line, but somehow it hadn't forgotten me. Over the next few weeks, I came home from work at the bakery, now in Eugene, under a new owner but with Walter's recipe card still in the drawer, and started to make the house into something that resembled a life. I painted the walls in soft colors, fixed the crooked cabinet hinges with YouTube tutorials, and planted herbs in chipped mugs along the kitchen window. The mattress was secondhand, the dining chairs mismatched, and the coffee table had a leg that wobbled if you leaned too far left. But it was peaceful. Every Sunday, Walter visited. He'd officially retired the year before, but still made bread at home. He brought pastries and once, a note in his careful handwriting. The only time I'm happy to lose staff. We sat on the porch drinking tea, not talking much. He never asked about my family. He knew, and for a while, it was enough, until the silver SUV pulled up. It was a Saturday afternoon, late spring. I was mowing the small lawn out front, my jeans streaked with grass and my hands wrapped around the handle of the second-hand push mower I'd bought off Craigslist. I saw the SUV park across the street, its tinted windows hiding familiar silhouettes. The door opened and Evelyn stepped out first, her blouse ironed to perfection, holding a canvas bag that said, "Live, laugh, love." Richard followed, slower, still tall, still silent. Then Emily, pregnant again, with a toddler on one hip and two other kids darting ahead like loose marbles. Her husband, a man I didn't know, brought up the rear. My fingers tightened around the mower handle. "Lauren!" Evelyn called, her voice light and sugary. "We thought we'd drop by, just a little surprise visit." I didn't move. "We heard you bought a house," Emily said, adjusting her sunglasses. "It's so cute, really, so you." They walked up the path like it had always been theirs. "We just wanted to see your place," Evelyn said. "And, well, we were hoping we could talk." I didn't invite them in. They stood on the porch while I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Emily shifted the toddler to her other hip. "It's just, things have gotten tight. The apartment's small, and we've got another on the way." She smiled like it was a joke I was supposed to laugh at. "And your father and I," Evelyn added quickly, "our retirement didn't go as planned. We had to give up the lease. It's been hard." Richard cleared his throat. "We thought maybe we could stay here for a little while. As a family, I let the words hang there. Then I said, 'You kicked me into a tent when I was 15. Emily opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "I lived outside, in the cold, while you were upstairs with candles in a crib." Evelyn's smile faltered. "We made mistakes, Lauren. We were under pressure. You've built such a strong life. We thought maybe you'd be ready to let go of the past." I looked at the gate, then back at her. "This isn't a family reunion. It's a boundary." The wind picked up slightly, sending the wind chimes into a soft song. Richard's gaze hardened. Emily looked offended. The toddler whined. "You'll regret this," Evelyn said, her voice brittle. I took a slow breath. "Already did," I replied. 15 years ago." They stood there for another minute, unsure of what to say. I stepped forward, opened the gate, and held it there. No one moved. Finally, Emily pulled her kids back, her mouth a tight line. Richard turned without a word. Evelyn lingered just a moment longer, as if hoping I'd change my mind. I didn't. That night, I locked the front door and then the gate, not to keep people out, but to keep my peace in. Some things rot quietly behind closed doors. Others explode in your face, demanding to be dealt with. Mine arrived in a thick white envelope tucked between a grocery coupon flyer and an ad for pest control. I opened it standing at the kitchen counter, one hand still holding a mug of chamomile tea. The moment my eyes scanned the bold letters, Chen v. Chen, my stomach turned. My parents were suing me, not for defamation, not for emotional distress, but for equitable interest in the house I bought with my own hands. The claim was short and sour. Family funds contributed to the down payment and early financial support, establishing partial ownership. I reread it 3 times, then sat down slowly, as if the truth had weight. I hadn't spoken to them since that afternoon on the porch, when I shut the gate in their faces. Apparently, that door wasn't enough. Now they were coming for the roof over my head. Denise Warner was recommended to me by Walter years ago. He said she was the kind of woman who wore silence like armor but kept blades in her briefcase. Her office smelled like coffee grounds and toner ink. Her lipstick was the color of blood oranges. She read the letter and didn't blink. "They're testing you," she said. "They think you'll fold to avoid the mess." "I won't," I said. She leaned back. "Then we fight." We combed through every receipt, every paycheck stub, every bank transfer. But Denise didn't stop there. "Your grandfather," she said one afternoon, tapping a line in an old probate filing. "There's a clause here. Vague, but interesting. Did he ever mention setting money aside for you?" My throat tightened. I remembered his hands, broad, veined, always smelling like sawdust and peppermint. He once told me, when I was 7 and hiding in his workshop, "I've saved something for her, just in case." No one had said another word since he passed. Denise did what Denise does. She found it. $136,000. That was the amount he had left for me. A savings account meant to be released the day I turned 18, except it was gone. Every last cent withdrawn before I even finished high school. The signature authorizing the withdrawal? Evelyn Chen. She had forged legal consent, claimed financial guardianship, and quietly rerouted the funds. The money had gone to 3 things: Emily's wedding, a down payment on my parents' mortgage, a business loan to Emily's husband, who had since declared bankruptcy. I stared at the bank statements laid out across my kitchen table like an autopsy. Denise stood at the sink, sipping coffee like she'd seen this scene too many times before. "They stole it," I said quietly, "and left me in a tent." She nodded. "And now they want the rest." We filed a civil suit for inheritance theft and will fraud. The hearing was scheduled for late August. By then, Oregon evenings had turned cooler. The trees outside the courthouse rustled like old paper. I wore the same white button-up I used when I first met the mortgage officer. Denise wore black like it was war. Evelyn and Richard sat across the room, flanked by a silver-haired attorney who smiled with all teeth and no warmth. Their strategy was simple: paint me as unstable, ungrateful, a hurt child clinging to resentment. Evelyn took the stand with a voice dipped in syrup. We did what we thought was best. Lauren was always different. She didn't connect with people. We used the money to hold our family together. Denise didn't flinch. When it was her turn, she stacked exhibits like building blocks. My grandfather's original will, with my name circled. The forged withdrawal form. Transaction records to Emily's wedding planner, florist, and a failed pet cafe business. A photograph. Me, 15, sitting outside a sagging tent, hair damp, eyes hollow. Taken by Mr. Patel, the neighbor who once offered me a towel. The courtroom stayed quiet. Not a dramatic silence, just the kind that sinks into your ribs. When the judge read the verdict, my legs felt numb. Evelyn and Richard were ordered to repay the full $136,000, plus $22,000 in damages and legal costs. Their claim to my property was permanently voided. Evelyn opened her mouth as if to object, but no sound came out. Richard stared at the floor, blinking hard. As we walked out, Denise murmured, "They took everything they could, but you're still standing." That night, I sat on my porch with a blanket and a slice of walnut bread Walter had left me earlier. There was a message on my phone, from Richard. Just 2 words, "Can we talk?" I deleted it. No hesitation, no second read. Just gone. Some people deserve closure. Others only understand silence. Walter stopped by the next morning with a new oven mitt, blue with tiny white flowers. "For what's next?" he said. I looked at the mitt, then at him. You always know when the storm's past. He smiled, soft and steady. Not storms, just seasons. And kid, I think yours is finally turning. You can survive without love, but you build a life when you learn to give it, even if you never received it. The scent of cinnamon and butter had become part of the air in my home. Every Saturday morning, I rolled up my sleeves, tied on an apron, and greeted a circle of eager little faces gathered around my kitchen island. Some had flour on their cheeks before we even began. Some didn't speak much at all. But all of them, every last one, showed up ready to knead, to laugh, and to learn. The idea had started small. A neighbor asked if I could teach her son how to make biscuits for a school project. Then another child tagged along. Then a cousin. Before I knew it, Miss Lauren's baking class was a weekend ritual. We worked with simple doughs, sourdough, cinnamon rolls, braided challah. But what we were really shaping was something quieter. Patience, warmth, and the belief that small hands could make something good. One quiet afternoon in October, just as the leaves outside turned to fire and the air hinted of early frost, a girl with tight curls and downcast eyes lingered after class. She had barely spoken all day, but I'd noticed her measuring flour with care, her tiny fingers pressing the dough like she was afraid to leave a mark. As I was wiping the counters, she tugged my sleeve and asked, "Does your mom like your cookies?" I paused, setting down the cloth. "No," I said softly. "She never really liked anything I made." I knelt to meet her eyes. "But I like yours." She blinked, surprised. Then a smile, small and uneven, broke across her face. She walked out the door, clutching her cooled pastry like a trophy. Later that evening, Walter dropped by with a box of snickerdoodles and a wink. He stepped inside and looked around. "This place," he said, sniffing the air, "smells like earned peace." We didn't need to say more. We rarely did. That night, after washing the last bowl and tucking away the aprons, I sat at my kitchen table and pulled out an old envelope. Inside was the letter I had once written to my 15-year-old self, forgotten until now. I unfolded it, the creases worn soft by time, and added a new note. "You were not the extra piece. You were the piece that built the foundation." I folded the letter back and placed it in my grandfather's wooden box, the only heirloom I ever truly had. No reply had come from my family in over a year. No calls, no lawsuits, no apologies. And strangely, no ache. Just quiet. Just space. A few days later, I hung a hand-painted sign above my front door. It read, "Welcome. Only love may enter." It wasn't meant to be poetic. It was simply the truth, not blood, not obligation, just love. On a breezy Sunday morning, as I unlocked the classroom at Sunrise Oven, now used with the owner's blessing for community events, I found the same curly-haired girl waiting early on the front steps. Her backpack was heavy in her lap, and her eyes sparkled with something new. "I brought a recipe," she said. "It's my grandma's. She used to bake it with me before she got sick." I nodded and smiled. "Let's try it together." The wind rustled the trees above us, scattering leaves across the sidewalk like golden confetti. Behind us, the oven warmed up slowly, and inside we began again, with rising dough, soft hands, and a kitchen full of second chances. Sometimes the quietest places carry the loudest echoes of who we've become. In the warmth of that little bakery and in the eyes of a child holding her first loaf, I found something my childhood never offered: peace that doesn't need to be proven. We don't always get to choose the family we're born into, but we can choose the love we pass forward. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means living gently in the space between what hurt us and what we now protect. Even without blood ties, we can build something whole. Knead it with care. Let it rise. If this story stirred something in you, I hope you'll share your thoughts or pass it along. Sometimes the right words find the right ears when they're simply offered with kindness.